A little bit about me, if you haven't noticed this. I am the youngest in my family by a long shot. Like, my siblings are so much older than me. And it's something with the youngest. I like to push buttons. How many of you are the youngest and like to push buttons? Yes, very good. How many of you have a younger sibling that pushes buttons and you hate it? Yeah, okay. Here's the thing. It just bleeds into all of my life. And sometimes I don't mind pushing buttons here. If I push a button sarcastically, a lot of times I'm like, get over it. There's one service every year that kind of makes me feel a little bit of guilt and a twinge of oof every year. And that's whenever we get to June and we celebrate people that are graduating from high school. We don't do this anymore, but now we if you were here, we bring people up on stage and we give them Bibles and pray over them. We used to go down the line and ask students what their plans were for the next year, all right? So, you'd have a line of people graduating high school, and you would go down the line and say, all right, so what are your plans for next year? What are you doing? And people are always, there's this pressure for young adults that age to be able to come up with the answer of what school they're going to, what their career for the rest of their life is going to look like. And, you can see the pressure. Some people just have it together. They have a plan. They know what they're going to do. And, they're like looking forward in life and thinking, I'm going to succeed. I've got my plan. I think I feel a twinge of guilt whenever that happens because that was not me. I had no plan. In fact, sometimes I wonder if I still do. But, it's one of those things where that just wasn't me. And I appreciated several years ago when we did that. It was back when our church was meeting at Baker Prairie. And we went down the line, and it got to my friend Leighton. And Leighton, how many of you know Leighton? You might not know him, but you've probably seen him. He's in back a lot of times wearing his fighter uniform. And at that time, though, it got to Leighton, and he was asked, what are you going to do next year? What are your plans for your life? And I just appreciated his honesty. He was like, I don't know. I don't know. Right? And people, some people kind of chuckled, and other people, you could just kind of hear the church like, oh, did he just say that? He doesn't know. But the reality is at that time, he didn't know what he would be doing. He didn't have a plan for his life. And yet God knew exactly what he would be doing. Now he works for the Canby Fire Department, and, this fall he's getting married. Just some great things going on in his life. And I look at that, and I think all of us, for the most part, have a desire to move forward in life, to succeed in life. And it always is helpful if you do have a plan of some kind to be able to do that. When you look at me as a pastor, there's different ways pastors judge success. And, it's one of those things, just so you know, being a pastor is a little bit weird. It's not like other jobs that people have. I always say only a pastor can understand a pastor. It's just there's weird things about being a pastor. So, how many of you in this room have been a pastor before? Raise your hand. Yeah, 2 people get it. Jay Hoffman's not here today. He's out, hunting, and man, that was a beautiful antelope he caught. But there's 3 of us here at our church, other than me, that really get that and understand it. I look at it, though, amongst pastors and the way other people judge pastors, there's forms of what looks like success. One of the most common questions I get when people find out I'm a pastor. Any guesses what the number one question I get is? Of course, my wife says it out loud. Yeah, how big is your church? Like 90% of the time, someone finds out I'm a pastor, oh, how big is your church? Right? That's the way we get judged as whether we're successful as a pastor. And, there's things, I'm excited that we've been seeing our church grow. I'm excited for other things at our church that like people from the outside look at it and are like, oh, wow, that church is going well. I mean, in fact, I'm going to go through a series of pictures here. I'm just looking at this, and, there's some good reasons why we can look at what's going on at our church and say, wow, things are going good. Like, right here, what do you see? Construction. Yeah, this is this week, and we're starting to see demo happen in our church building there. That's an area where our kids' classrooms are going to be. Believe it or not, that's actually kind of where we're going to be worshiping in just a few months. Starting to see things happen. That's one of the biggest benefits is we're going to have restrooms. But you look at it, and I'm excited about this. This is one of those things where it's like, okay, things are happening. God's blessing. God's doing something. But the kinds of things that really show that the Lord is blessing, you know what they are? These kind of things right here. You look at it, and last Sunday, we had planned for there to be 2 baptisms. We had a plan for there to be 2 baptisms last Sunday. And after first service, we found out, oh, wait, there's going to be like 2 more baptisms. So there's the first one. Let's go to the next slide. Second one. Next slide. Third one. And the next one. Fourth. Isn't that awesome that we had 4 baptisms? Like we started out thinking like, we're going to have 2 baptisms today. Then it jumped to 4, and then there's this one. We were all done doing baptisms. We're walking away, and somebody's like, can I be baptized too? So like last Sunday, we had 5 baptisms. That's like the stuff that's really cool where you see like God moving and doing something. And then just the other night, I got a phone call from somebody else who's like, hey, I know 3 people, possibly 4 who want to get baptized. Can we do that? Isn't that awesome? That's like the kind of stuff where we see the fruit of ministry, and that's the kind of stuff for me as a pastor. I'm excited about a building. I'm excited to see things move forward with that, but that right there is what we're all about, is seeing the kingdom of Christ grow, all right? And as a church, we look at things in in that context, but today we're going to be in Genesis 31, and we're going to read a story, Genesis 30, and we're going to read a story that's really odd and crazy. We're going to read about how Jacob prospered and Jacob became successful. And I'm saying really odd. This is a weird story. And I know some of you are saying, didn't you say that like the last 2 or 3 times we've done sermons out of Genesis? Yes, they keep getting weirder, okay? And this is a message here. I'd originally planned to take half of chapter 30 and all of chapter 31 because it's one story. And then I realized something. If we want children's volunteers, we can't do church services that are that long. So we're cutting it in. Yes, our children's workers in here are like, yes. So we're making this a part 1 and part 2. But we're going to look at this and really focus in on how Jacob became successful and how he prospered. And I think in doing that, my hope is that for all of us, as families, as individuals, maybe at our jobs and in life, and for us as a church, we can begin to understand how it is we can move forward, prosper, and be successful in our life. This is what we read in Genesis chapter 30, starting at verse 25. As soon as Rachel had born Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own country, home and country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will give it." And Jacob said to him, "You yourself know how I served you, and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly. And the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when shall I provide for my household also?" And Laban said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flocks and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later. When you come to look into my wages with you, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. And Laban said, Good, let it be as you have said. But that day, Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. As we look at this story, we're finding that as we continue in the story about Jacob and his life, and he's married Rachel and Leah. At this time, he has 11 sons and one daughter, that it's actually been about 20 years that has taken place from the time that he first came to stay with his uncle Laban until this starts taking place. 20 years have gone by. And during that time, what we have found is that when Jacob got to Laban's household, Laban didn't really have much. But as Jacob has been there now for 2 decades, he has been working for his father-in-law. He has been working for 14 of those 20 years to pay a bride price for his 2 wives. And as he has done that, God has blessed Laban because of Jacob. God has blessed Laban because of Jacob. Now, I'm not going to go in incredible depth today with this. As we get to the story of Joseph, we'll probably go into this more. But there is a theological term for that. It's called common grace. Common grace. What does that mean? It means that the Lord blesses not just people who call upon his name, but he also blesses those who don't, because God's people are present there. Because God's people are present. Years ago, it was probably like 6 years ago, I watched an hour and a half lecture. It was a study that these 2 professors did. And what they had noticed, they were professors of economics, that the Western cultures and societies tended to be more prosperous than other parts of the world. And as they looked at this, they wanted to find out, why is that the case? Why, when you study Western society, can you see this expansion and this growth and the way things have prospered around the world? They had all kinds of ideas and theories why that was, but these 2 non-Christian professors of economics, you know what they discovered? It was Christianity. They could map it for the last 2,000 years, that wherever Christianity spread, whole cities, regions, countries, even continents started prospering. Why? It's common grace. As the Lord blesses his people, those blessings naturally pour out to other people. A few years ago, I was listening to a missionary talk. It was a gentleman who's done all kinds of work in different Asian countries, and specifically in China. And one of the things that he said was just fascinating in China, that this is a country that is pretty much anti-Christian, and yet they loved finding companies and business owners that were Christians to start businesses. Why? Because the work ethic that was there. Because there was an honesty and an integrity that was there most of the time. Should be all the time, but most of the time. And they just realized, even though we are against their faith, we love the way they prosper. That's incredible, and that's exactly what you are seeing in this story. It's what we're going to see again as we go further into Genesis. It's what we saw earlier. Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, was blessed because Abraham was near to him. We saw it in the next generation. The Philistines were blessed. Why? Because Isaac was near to them. And I do think that that is something for us to really consider in this day and age. A lot of Christians have the idea, as we look at our world and our culture today, that we need to separate from our world, to sort of pull out where it's a us versus them mentality. That's not the gospel. And that's not the way the church in Acts operated. It's not the way that the church operated for the first few hundred years of its existence. In fact, the biggest reason, according to different writers in Roman culture in the first few hundred years, the biggest reason that people were coming to Christ and that as they persecuted Christians and tried to martyr and kill Christians, that the faith just kept growing is because of the blessings that came from Christians. They just couldn't stamp out Christianity because Christians were so loving and kind and generous, people of integrity, people of their word, and there was just a blessing that would happen wherever they were. Absolutely amazing. So we have in this story Jacob going to Laban and saying, look, I have been working hard for you all these years, but I need to get something from this. I need to be able to have some type of salary. And Laban, he recognizes by divination, somehow he used spiritual means to discover that all of his blessings were coming from God to Jacob and then bleeding out to him. But Laban is not just thankful for that. Laban is the kind of man who's always trying to get more. And so there's a deal that's made between Laban and his son-in-law. And the deal is basically, look, you have all your herds, and Jacob says, you get all of the solid-colored goats and all of the white lambs, basically the ones with the dominant genes. All of those are yours, but just give me any goat that is spotted or striped or any black lamb. I'll take those ones, and that'll be my salary, okay? I'm going to work hard for you. I'm going to keep doing this. Just give me that portion. You're going to get, obviously, the ones that are the more purebred, the ones that are more dominant. I will take the other ones. And they agreed to it, but did you notice what Laban did? He took all of the current spotted and striped ones, the ones that are black, and took them away with his sons. So what's happening in this is right from the get-go, he is totally stacking the deck in his favor. Even though this is his son-in-law, even though this is the husband of 2 of his daughters, 11 of his grandsons and his 1 precious granddaughter. Isn't it great to have granddaughters? I just, you look at it, he just doesn't care. He is out for the money for himself. And the story goes on in verse 37. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places, where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks towards the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock that they might breed among the sticks. Good grief, that was a hard sentence to read. But for the feebler of the flock, he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants, male servants, and camels and donkeys. Wow. Now, this is why I say this is a really weird story. This makes no sense. And, growing up, I used to hear, people at church, Sunday school teachers try to explain this. Later, you go to Bible college, and people argued about this and tried to say whether or not this worked. You go to seminary, and by then, let's just be honest, in seminary, you just bypass stories like this, right? I even went and I decided to hear what J. Vernon McGee had to say about this. Okay. Jacob comes up with a plan. The animals breed while they're eating. So as they eat, I am going to take sticks and peel them so the sticks are striped. And as they're eating and breeding, if they're looking at striped or speckled sticks, they will therefore usually have striped or speckled offspring. No, that's not the way that works. And this is just one of those things. I just want to say, if you've been taught that does work, it doesn't. It's sort of like, years ago in our family having a debate. This is what I was taught when I was young, that in our veins, our blood, when it's coming out of our heart and going to our body, that it's red, but by the time it goes all the way down to my hand, the oxygen is out, and so that it comes back to my heart and it's blue. All right, I was taught that when I was younger by a teacher. And I thought that for a long time. But, some of you are smirking and you're like, Tim thought that. I was taught that by an elementary school teacher, and not the one that's here today. It's one of those things where I believe that. Others of you are like, wait, that's not the way that works? No, it's not the way it works. Our blood's just red, all right? But that's what I was taught, and people tried to explain it that way, not fully understanding why I'm looking at these veins that are blue, right? Okay. We've advanced in different ways, and there's these incredible studies in this thing that we call genetics, and the way that our DNA works, and we know that this is not the way this works. Okay, so if you've been taught that this works that way, no, it doesn't. It just doesn't work this way. But it's fascinating to look at this because Jacob had an idea. He had an idea, and his idea bore fruit. And when we look at this, it didn't just bear fruit where suddenly he's getting more goats and sheep than his father-in-law, but that verse 43 is incredible. He increased greatly, and he had large flocks. Not only large flocks, but he had male servants and female servants, and beyond that, check this out, this is awesome. Guy had camels and donkeys. How many of you ever wanted a camel or donkey? Right? Yeah, no. How many of you ever wanted a Mercedes and a Jeep Wrangler? I mean, that's what it's saying right there, right? Multiple Mercedes, multiple Jeep Wranglers. That's what he's saying. This is incredible. And it's all because Jacob came up with a wonderful plan to take sticks and make stripes on them. Whenever I have heard that taught, part of the problem is twofold. One, we forget that the Bible is written words. They are literary genres. So you interpret different types of literary genres in different ways. For instance, if something is poetry, there is truth there, but you can't just take it exactly at face value. You read Song of Solomon, and you look at the way that Solomon is describing his lover, and you actually draw it out. She's really weird looking, right? Because he's calling different parts of her bodies different things, like gazelles and coconuts. And, he's using illustrations, all right? But you look at other parts, and this is not poetry. This is narrative. And when you read a narrative, it's simply saying the facts of what happened in the story. That's all it's saying. You have to go to other parts of the Bible sometimes to be able to interpret the facts within the story. Or there's another easy way sometimes. You just read a little further. You just read a little further. I one time, it was close to 20 years ago, sat down with a buddy of mine and watched the series Band of Brothers. How many of you ever watched Band of Brothers? You know how long it takes to watch that series? I mean, those things are an hour long, and how many of them are there? It takes a long time. And unfortunately, I watched it at my buddy's house, and so it was his TV and his remote. And man, he kept stopping that thing all the time. Like, right in the middle of a great battle scene. He like stopped me like, now, wait a second. Why did that guy just do that? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Why did he just do that? And finally, I was just like, would you just push play, and maybe if we watch a little bit further, we'll figure it out, right? Well, we just read to the end of chapter 30. Let's go to chapter 31. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has gained all this wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before. But the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. Ooh, we're getting more to the story. God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock from your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see. All the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise and go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do." This is just an incredible thing to understand. And it's too bad that often when this has been taught, we miss the point. This is not a passage about animal husbandry and about how to get spotted, speckled, and striped goats. Why did Jacob prosper? Because it was the will and the grace of his God. He came up with a plan of how to make it happen. But when he reports this story to his wives, there's nothing in there that God said, "All right, I'm going to give you a large flock of spotted, speckled, and striped goats. And the way I'm going to do that, Jacob, is that I want you to go take some sticks." And you see, he didn't do that. He simply said, "This is what I'm going to do." And Jacob came up with the plan of how he thought God was going to make that happen. Did God need that from Jacob? No, not at all. And I think that's so important for us to step back and take a look at. Just step back and look at that. How often in our lives do we come up with our plans of how we think we are going to be successful, how we are going to be prosperous, how we are going to get ahead in life? Even looking at things when God says, "I'm going to bless you, I'm going to do this," and we say, and I know exactly how he's going to do it. Have you ever been guilty of that? Or are you guilty of that now? We find over and over and over again that there are people in the Bible that God works through and with in absolutely incredible ways, blessing them. And one of the most incredible things in the Bible is when they are humbled enough to be able to look back and say, "This wasn't me. This was God. This wasn't me, this was God." Abraham was able to do that. We're going to find, just a little hint, in a couple Sundays that finally Jacob will realize that in his life. At the end of Genesis, Joseph comes to understand that. One of the great passages of someone understanding that in the Bible is found in 1 Chronicles chapter 29 at verse 10. At the end of King David's life, he had wanted to build a temple to the Lord. He looked and saw that he had built himself this beautiful cedar palace, and that the Ark of the Covenant was in an old, tattered tabernacle or tent. And he decided, you know what? I need to build a beautiful temple, a beautiful house for that ark. And God said to him, "No, you're a man of blood on your hands, a warrior. You're not the one to do it." So David got everything ready. He started getting supplies ready and plans ready for his son Solomon to build it. And near the end of David's life, we read this in 1 Chronicles 29. Therefore David blessed the Lord in the presence of all the assembly. And David said, "Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. For all that is in heaven, in the heavens and in the earth, is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. In your hand are power and might, and in your hand it is to make great and to give strength to all. And now we thank you, our God, and praise your glorious name. But who am I and what is my people that we should be able thus to offer willingly? For all things come from you. Will you repeat that with me? For all things come from you, and of your own have we given you. For we are strangers before you and sojourners, as all our fathers were. Our days on the earth are like a shadow, and there is no abiding. O Lord, our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a house for your holy name comes from your hand and is all your own. I know, my God, that you test the heart and have pleasure in uprightness. In the uprightness of my heart, I have freely offered all these things. And now I have seen your people who are present here offering freely and joyously to you. O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, Jacob, our fathers, keep forever such purposes and thoughts in the hearts of your people and direct their hearts toward you. Brothers and sisters, if you're here today and you are somebody that the world would look at and say, wow, you were successful. How did that happen? How did you get that way? Can I share with you what the right answer is? It's the Lord. Brothers and sisters, if you're here today and you don't feel like you're successful, if you don't feel like you've prospered, if you don't feel like you're moving the direction that you've planned and you're trying to come up with another plan, I'm not saying that planning isn't good. Being wise with your money is a good thing. Trying to map out how you can bless your family and work hard is a good thing. But there's a lot of people that have had great plans, a lot of people that have been really hard workers, only to have the rug pulled right out from under them by circumstances outside their control. Trust the Lord. He is the one that gives and takes away. He is the one that can prosper you and move you forward. As a church, He is the one who is giving us a season of blessing and harvest. He is the one. When I was young, I joined a movement of churches called the Christ the King Network. And at that time, we were one of the 10 fastest growing churches in the country. Christianity Today, Outreach Magazine, were writing articles about Christ the King, and I thought, what an honor that I get to be part of this movement. It ended up within just a few years, we had close to 50 different worship centers in the United States and hundreds of worship centers overseas. The leader of our movement wrote a book, and he wrote it and started selling it out of his trunk, and pretty soon Zondervan picked it up and published it, and he started publishing more books through Zondervan, and all of the books were how-to books. What prideful arrogance on the part of our leadership at that time. To think that the growth that was happening was because of our ingenuity. I've had people ask me recently, specifically other pastors, when they look at what's going on in our church, and they'll say, like, what are you doing that's making that happen? What changed? And you know what I tell them time and time again? I quit trying to make things grow and just started praying and preaching the gospel. And the Lord has just been blessing.